is Notsam Wrestling.
Introducing your host from New York, here is Sam Roberts.
Getting to night one of WrestleMania, I guess 37. Corey Graves called it WrestleMania 37 once in the set reveal, which even when I heard him say at WrestleMania 37, I went, ooh! Like, I don't know if we're supposed to mention, WrestleMania has gotten to the age where a lady never tells, but WrestleMania, as it were, talking about night one, I couldn't think of anybody. I'm fortunate because, I asked this individual to come on and talk about night one before it happened, but I think of literally every pay-per-view that's maybe ever happened, having somebody with some production expertise is probably the guy to talk to, at least for a section of tonight's pay-per-view. But Mike Mansury is back. Of course, you know him from the best wrestling podcast, period, alongside Mark Madden, on the PMI, right? PMI?
Yeah, the best wrestling show, period, under the PMI banner. Pat McAfee Incorporated.
Right. I know it's not the network, but you can get, by the way, now, we talked to Mike a few weeks back when the podcast was just launching. You can now, the Best Wrestling Podcast, period, has its own Twitter account, has its own YouTube. All the episodes go up every week in audio and video. So it's definitely one you want to check out because, Mark Madden has his level of expertise, is not only somebody who's followed and reported on the business for years, but obviously anybody that watched during the Attitude Era, commentator on Nitro and everything. So he understands the business. And Mike Mansury, who we've talked about, a person who worked behind the scenes as a producer and as high level as one could get without getting to the very, very top level in WWE for a long time. You can go back a couple weeks and listen to the conversation that Mike and I had if you need a refresher on that. But I want to talk about night one of WrestleMania, and we will definitely talk about the beginning because that is where I think you have the most unique perspective on matters. But I think that we got to start with the main event. I feel like WrestleMania was done right in the sense that you leave when the last match. It's not just WrestleMania; it's every big pay-per-view, but WrestleMania specifically. When the last match leaves you feeling the way it intended to make you feel, it kind of makes the entire show seem like a success, doesn't it?
Oh my God, 100%. It's the old adage, Sam, that you always want to leave them going home happy. And look, I will say that I was skeptical of WWE approaching this year's WrestleMania with another 2-night extravaganza. I just thought that with your first show back, it didn't necessarily fit where we were in the world compared to last year. But I sit here in front of you and I sit corrected.
Yeah, and I think that the 2-night thing, because I was thinking about that a lot as I was watching the first night, was this 2-night thing allows attention to be paid to a lot of stories and superstars that it might not get paid to if you were trying to pack in both rosters into one night. I don't know that Bad Bunny would have gotten as much time if the entire show had been one night. I don't know. I certainly wouldn't have had the women's tag team Turmoil on pay-per-view. I don't know that Seth and Cesaro would have been able to just put on a great wrestling match in the middle of the show if you were trying to pack everything into one night. So I am kind of liking this thing. And you also have the opportunity where it's like, okay, would WWE have put Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks on as the last match of the night if the other option was Roman, Edge, and Daniel Bryan triple threat? That might have been a tougher call. I don't know if that call would have been made, but when we have 2 nights to play with, we can have this moment without it costing anybody anything.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. And it's funny. I was texting with a buddy of mine last night during SmackDown because I obviously, I don't really try to.
You mean WrestleMania SmackDown?
WrestleMania SmackDown. Yeah. Again, I sit in front of you correctly. And we were just kind of talking about it. And I don't pay attention too much to the spoilers. I like to kind of see stuff as I get it. If I can't watch something, I'll just try to recap it on Twitter or something. And the magnitude of talent that were featured in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal just kind of showed you how valuable that real estate was going to be across 2 nights of WrestleMania. And, to your point, if it were one night, what would the landscape have been like? What would the card have looked like? Would the matches felt rushed? What was going to be, what sort of elements are going to be filled in there? I mean, you can go back to WrestleMania 29 and the famous story that wound up playing out on Total Bellas, as much as people think that was, dramatized for that show, but it was reality in that WrestleMania 29 was going so heavy that the women's 6-man tag match that was slated, maybe in 6 women or an 8 woman, I can't remember off the top of my head, but that match was cut altogether for the show. It was cut from the show for time. So
while the show was happening,
yeah, because at the time there was no WWE network. You were bound by the confines of traditional pay-per-view and a hard start time and a hard end time. And now that's, that doesn't necessarily matter when you're running your own ship with a WWE network being on Peacock. But again, just shows you how valuable that real estate is. And the landscape would have been completely different had we been down to one night tonight.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at guys like Corbin, Nakamura, obviously Jey Uso, who won the Battle Royal, it was a loaded Battle Royal to the point where it was kind of, you were alerted, you were alarmed a little bit, like, man, like, I don't feel like there's room. I'm not looking at WrestleMania going, it needs more matches, but I guess the talent roster is this deep now. And sometimes I think you don't even realize it. But I want to talk about the main event itself, because I think that you and I had a pretty similar sight looking at this match going into it, which was, I know that I was skeptical of the way the Bianca Belair, skeptical and critical of the way the Bianca Belair Sasha Banks story had been told. To me, I said this on Twitter, people thought I was nuts. Some people, I think a lot of people agreed, actually, but you always read the ones that that are negative. But I truly think that Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair as a pairing is potentially a Rock Austin level rivalry for this generation. That's what I see when I see them. Now, I don't know. I thought going in, before it was announced that this was going to be the main event, I was really thinking about it, and I had decided that this absolutely should be the main event, because I had this faith that regardless of the fact that the story was what it was going in, and that the weirdness of the tag team stuff, like none of that really amounted to anything at all. And even on the Go Home show, even on SmackDown, there wasn't this feeling that went beyond, I just want to see this match because I want to see this match. Like, the story wasn't the hook. It was, I don't know what they're doing on TV, but I do know that once the cuffs are off and Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair are in the ring, that's where the story is going to get told. And I think they were hugely successful in doing that tonight.
Oof. Understatement.
Yeah.
Just an absolute understatement. And yeah, you and I both shared the same critiques across the board in just the build of this, from the moment that Bianca won the Royal Rumble to the moment that she declared that Sasha was the champion that she was going to face at WrestleMania. Was with Bianca, you already have this character, the EST, which by nature is a cocky, braggadocious character that she backs up in every sense of the word. On the other side of the coin, you have the boss, the established veteran who really has done it all and seen it all. She's been there twice and, back around. But for some reason, the narrative and the creative that they were trying to push onto two established characters just didn't fit. It was very much a square peg in a round hole situation. And it wasn't until about 2 weeks out from WrestleMania where you saw WWE lean into the story that they should have been telling from Jump Street.
Yeah.
And it made a world of difference. Like, if I'm not mistaken, Sam, I can't remember when it was. I think it may have been SmackDown the week prior to the Go Home to WrestleMania episode. They had run a promo, or maybe it was Raw. They'd run a promo promoting the match for Sasha Bianca at WrestleMania, and just the bites that they used, and, just really painting that story of this cocky, young, outstanding new presence and the established veteran who is also pretty much at the top of the mountain. That story was so beautifully told in that promo. And I remember just sitting in my living room just going, oh my God, how did you not do this from Jump Street? It was gift wrapped and just handed to you.
Yeah.
And all you had to do was just let the thing flourish. But we got something more than what we anticipated. So as a fan, I'm grateful, but as a storyteller, I just, as much as I love a great match doesn't mean as much without a great story. And I will stand and fight anyone on that hill till the day they put me in the ground.
That's why I also look at this as that sort of long-term thing. Like, I think this should be a rivalry that lasts years and years and years. So it's not even necessarily about this micro-level story that leads us to the WrestleMania match. It becomes, this is a chapter, what we saw. Leading up to this match and this match itself tonight, this wasn't the end of the story. This was a chapter and something that should last a long time. I mean, the more I thought about the Austin Rock rivalry, the more I thought that it paralleled this one, because I think it goes beyond even what they were talking about in the promos. When you think about Sasha Banks is that veteran at this point, but I don't think that character feels that way. I don't think that character feels like she's been on the top of the mountain. She lives on the top of the mountain. I think that character still feels like she's fighting for every scrap that she gets. It's one of those things that, the outside perception is like, yep, Sasha Banks is one of, if not the best women on the roster. But I think the character Sasha Banks still feels like she needs to prove that. And that's because that Sasha is one of the people that created the division, ultimately. Like the women's wrestling division in the WWE as we know it, it was Sasha and Charlotte and Bayley and Becky. Like they were fighting to be a part of something that didn't even exist. So not only did they have to get to the top of the mountain, they had to build the mountain itself. And once that mountain is built and you've gotten yourself to the top of it, well, now you've opened the door for just this immense amount of talent to come in and be a part of it themselves. And that, to me, is where Bianca Belair comes in, where she's like, well, I've worked just as hard as you did. Just because you're the one that built the mountain doesn't mean that I can't be the one standing on top of it now. And I see like the way that Austin did not come into the WWE to be a main eventer and to be the WWE champion. He had to completely change the industry, claw and scratch and change everything in order to be the guy. And he opened that door for somebody like The Rock to come in. And The Rock goes, yeah, I understand that you built this mountain and now it's my time to stand on top of it. And that to me is such a great story. It's a story anybody could relate to. It's a story that depending on where you are in life, you're going to have sympathy for one or the other. There are going to be people that are like, no, Sasha's time isn't up yet. She's just getting started. And there are going to be other people that are going like, well, you know what? I like the new kid. I like this. And that I think ultimately, I think that's the story that played itself out in the ring with Sasha and Bianca tonight.
Well, Sam, you said something pretty important there at the beginning, and you were dead on the money in terms of where the Sasha Banks character is and how she may not necessarily always feel like that truly established veteran. And I know the Sasha Banks character has a chip on her shoulder because the woman behind the Sasha Banks character has a chip on her shoulder. Mercedes and Sasha are very much one and the same, where Sasha is just an extension of who Mercedes is. And that chip is there because she does still feel like, even though she's established, that she's still proving herself. And I don't feel that I'm speaking out of school by saying it, because I feel like the proof is in the pudding. Mm-hmm. I mean, it even played out in storyline after Sasha became SmackDown Women's Champion. And I never realized it because, again, when you're inside, you kind of lose sight of the forest when you're amongst the trees. But the whole stat about Sasha had never successfully defended a title after winning it. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. But you knew that she did. You knew that she did. You knew, and you knew it mattered to her.
Yeah, 100%. And the fact that you have, again, to kind of go to your Rock Austin correlation, that you do have this new presence in your locker room, this just absolute freak of an athlete, Bianca Belair, who's got, star just written across every inch of her. You've got this presence coming in, but there's definitely that feeling of, hey, I'm still here. Right. And as you said, right, like I'm at the top of the mountain and I don't want anybody on the top of this mountain with me. This is my time. This is my spot. So that chip is definitely there. And I love the correlation of Rock Austin because, normally especially now where we are, Sam, and kind of the overall temperature of the business, you would say that's a pretty unfair label or burden even to put onto talent. Mm-hmm. I firmly believe that Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair can carry that banner of that Rock Austin feud vein. And I think they have the potential to take it even farther, because these really are two once in a generational athletes. And I know that statement just sounds redundant. It's like pluralizing the Lone Rangers, right? Shout out Airheads. But these two women are so unbelievably special and gifted and talented. And the story's there. It's baked in, and they finally leaned into it, they being WWE. You've got legs. You can take this across years, and they're both still so young that there's still so much time to invest into this story and just watch it develop. And it's not something that has to happen consistently over the course of the next couple of years. Just like Rock Austin, you can break away and revisit, and it'll still mean that much, if not more, every time you go back.
And by the way, if there's anything we've learned from WrestleManias of past, just because something is once in a lifetime doesn't mean it can't happen twice.
No, absolutely. Twice in a lifetime's a great moniker.
It's great. It's fantastic. It's almost better in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Was there a point? Because I know for me there was a singular moment in the match when I was like, oh, this is going to actually exceed expectations. And expectations were high. And it's tough when expectations are high. Like, it's always, when you go into a pay-per-view, like I remember like Great Balls of Fire was a pay-per-view where the expectations were incredibly low. I mean, we can talk about WrestleMania. It's like WrestleMania 31 had very, very low expectations, right? Great Balls of Fire works in the same way. But WrestleMania 31, I remember I was there. And I was sitting there and people bought tickets going, this is going to suck. Like, that was the vibe. And the first match happened, and Bryan won the Intercontinental title in this amazing ladder match, and people were like, oh, well, that was good, but I think everything else is going to suck. And as the night went on, slowly but surely, things did not suck. And then you got to Roman and Brock, and everybody was like, okay, but this is definitely going to suck. And Seth actually comes out and cashes in. And because expectations, I think, were low, and then this amazing thing happened. It made the amazing thing even better. So it can be really difficult when expectations were as high as they were going into Sasha and Bianca. But I think that they actually exceeded those high expectations. And for me, there was a moment, but I want to ask for you, was there a singular moment where you were like, oh, this is going to be that. This is going to be it.
Yes. So, and just like you, I am curious to see where that moment came for you. For me, though, there was a moment of worry at the beginning, because as emotional and as genuine as it was, I was really worried when Bianca started to cry when they were facing off, because emotions can get the better of you in a good way and a bad way. And I was really hoping that she was able to channel that up. And I think Sasha smacking her in the face kind of brought her back down to earth. But the moment that I knew that we were in store for something special was the spot where Sasha dove out onto Bianca. Bianca rolls through, picks Sasha up, gorilla presses her, walks her up the stairs, and launches her into the ring. When that, I legitimately, Sam, was sitting on that couch over my shoulder there. And I God bless my neighbors, but I just got up out of my chair and said, holy shit.
Dude, same moment. Exact same moment. And I felt the same way about the emotion thing too. It was like, if this works, that's a beautiful moment that you just captured. But at the same time, I'm going to, you can forget your story or just lose your story. You know, if you get lost in your own real life emotions, because that's what we saw, real life emotions, then you can not, you're sometimes not back into the story. I mean, that's why people method act, because they don't want their real life to come out on screen. But yeah, no, for me, it was the exact same moment where I was like, the roll through I thought was cool.
Yes,
and then when she
very
got her,
Cena-esque.
Yes. And then when she got her up in that press, and it wasn't really a helped press either. It wasn't one of those presses where Sasha it's a push-up, like she's planking on the shoulder. It was Bianca carrying that weight. Like, that was Bianca's shoulders doing everything. And I'm going, oh my God. And I'm like, what's the plan? When she walked up the stairs, that's when I was like, yep, this is it. Because that, dude, the fact that Bianca is as young in wrestling as she is, and has really only been on the main roster for a year, and half of that time was vignettes. And now she's got a main event of WrestleMania. She's got the balls to go for that spot, and then it pays off. That's when I'm like, this is legendary. This is a legendary match.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to your Rock Austin correlation, right? Rock debuted in November of '96. And, he'd been doing USWA and paying his dues down there, but he really showed up on the big scene in November of '96. He and Austin had WrestleMania 15 in March of '99.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So again, just a short span. It just speaks to the type of athletes and performers that, Rock and Bianca were and are.
You know what else was an amazing spot, I thought? It was when, Sasha does that move where she does where the opponent is in the tree of woe and then is holding themselves up by their hands, and then she does the stomp. The fact that Bianca just didn't hold herself up and Sasha had to roll through that, I was like, yeah. Because that's one of those things that you ask, like, it always looks cool, but you're also like, why is that person holding themselves up for that? That doesn't make any sense. And the fact that you just went logical, and Bianca was like, I'm not gonna let you just stomp me in the chest right now. and then she moves, and Sasha just went full force into the corner. It was awesome.
Yeah, I started laughing because I was thinking about when Alberto Del Rio first started doing that in WWE, I would always be like, well, why wouldn't you just let go?
yeah.
There's your foil.
There was a spot like that in the Gauntlet Eliminator at Takeover that I loved when Bronson Reed catches Leon Ruff after the splash and then picks up Leon Ruff and throws him in the ring at Swerve Scott. And Swerve ducked instead of catching him and letting him take him down. And I was like, yeah, that's what you should always do. And like, unfortunately, Leon just like went down like a sack of potatoes. But I'm like, yeah, of course you duck when somebody throws a person at you. Like, thank God we saw some logic. I thought the finish, I loved the finish because it felt like a false finish. And I think Michael Cole probably felt like what I was feeling, but it felt like a false finish. Like when they were just kind of jockeying to figure out whose finisher was going to get on, which I loved that, they were going back and forth. And then Bianca misses. Sasha tries to get her. And then Bianca, and because they didn't do it 10 times, they only did it like 4 times. It felt like, oh, this isn't it. But I think it lended so much credibility to Bianca's finisher that she got the clean pin because she hit the finisher that it made me go like, oh my God, because it could have, even timing wise, it's like if that match had gone on another 5 or 10 minutes, that wouldn't have been crazy, right? It was so, and you go, whoa, she did it. I loved it.
So there was before we get to the finish for me, right? Like there was another point again where I just had kind of like oh my God, Bianca is ready for this. She's ready for that next level. Because of the folks that I was brought up in this business surrounded by, and especially guys like Pat Patterson and Shawn Michaels, who I always learned from them the importance of the art of selling. Mm-hmm. Selling is just as important as what your physicality is in the ring. There was a moment where Sasha had wrapped Bianca's braid around her arm and locked her in the bank statement. They took a great shot of Bianca reaching for the ropes. But if you looked at her face, Sam, there was desperation, panic, everything else in between conveyed in that face that Bianca had during that moment. And, Sasha obviously was brilliant as she always is. But man, that moment for me kind of was like, shit, all right, she really is ready for this if it happens. Then you go into the finishing sequence. And as you said, it wasn't overly done of counter to counter to counter to counter to counter to counter. What I loved was when Sasha went to do the old tug of war with Bianca's hair. And I wish they would have had, a quick cutaway of just Bianca when she looked up at Sasha and did the head shake as opposed to the hard camera, because you really couldn't see her full face. But when Bianca did that head shake and she just fucking rips the hair right and just goes right for Sasha, man, it was awesome. That the finishing sequence was great. That match was a masterpiece. I would say probably one of, if not the best wrestling matches, doesn't matter gender or anything else, the best wrestling match I've seen in a very long time.
Yeah, and probably the best on the show, which is tough. I mean, when you have Seth Rollins versus Cesaro, and you're talking about that wasn't maybe the best wrestling match on the show, that means that the other had to be home run out of the park. Yeah, I also thought that Bianca, like, I hate, because it's such a trope, the whole like looking shocked after the almost 3 count because she kicked out of this thing, and then the announcer has to say the look of desperation on the face,
the shock and disbelief.
Yeah, and it's like you really have to be creative to make that feel new, because it's every single match. And I thought Bianca, the fact that she overdid it as much as she did, I thought it added to it. Like, I thought it made me feel like Bianca was having a real reaction to it. That's the other thing with the finish being what it was, and like, you know, the fakey. It didn't feel choreographed, and so much of this match didn't feel like a dance. And so much of wrestling these days ends up feeling like a dance, and like you can feel them working together. And the art of wrestling is that the people in the ring are so good that they are working together, and they know exactly what each one of them is doing. But we can't tell that they're that aware and hyper aware and working together. And I thought that it was great that it did not feel so choreographed, and it didn't hurt either, Mike, that literally the best hair whip that Bianca has ever done. Ever. She's done it in every match. The best hair whip she's ever done landed for this match.
That's all I can say, especially after you see the wealth of Sasha when she was down at the ring after Bianca went over.
Yeah.
Hands down the best hair whip that you probably ever will ever have. You know, who knows what's to come out of it in the future. But you know, you said it best, Sam. And, you know, I said this when I was talking, when Mark Madden and I were talking on our podcast, the Best Wrestling Show, period, cheap plug, when we were talking about the Britt Baker Thunder Rosa match. Mm-hmm. And what I loved about that match was that it felt like a fight. It didn't look like a dance. I use those words exactly. And to me, and just like you, that's when wrestling is at its best. Mm-hmm. And the funny part is that for viewers, for us, it's always at its best when it looks like a fight. Mm-hmm. And for the talent, when it's that good of a groove for them, it feels like a dance. You know what I mean? So it's kind of that inverse feeling. But like when you're gelling with somebody and you've got that chemistry, it feels like you're dancing. So, you know, what they put on tonight was nothing short of just a classic. And it's you know, everyone for the longest while has always used Savage Steamboat as a WrestleMania match of reference for as like a benchmark, what you should hit. You know, Shawn and Brett also gets thrown into the conversation, not as much. Bianca and Sasha will be the big leader in that conversation going forward.
I think Sasha finally topped Sasha and Bayley at TakeOver.
Yeah,
maybe. History's going to have to tell that, right? We're fresh with this. It's like, but you know, I mean, that match is always going to be special because it was first. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, it was special because it was first. And what was so great about that match, outside of the performance, Sam, was the genuine emotion that was involved with it.
Yeah.
You know, that's what made that match so great. You had Bayley, who at the time was kind of she was the runt of the 4 horsewomen litter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, you know, she was very much the overlooked and forgotten one. So she has this incredible moment, but you have that even more emotional moment on the back end of all that, where the 4 horsewomen come together and kind of give you that curtain call sort of feeling. I think this surpassed it. And it's hard for me to say because that match does hold a very special place in my heart from NXT TakeOver Brooklyn because of what that event meant to me personally. But I think Bianca and Sasha surpassed that match. And to me, that's the new benchmark for the women to hit. And, you know, look, and I think for the men to take a look at.
Well, let's talk about the beginning of the pay-per-view. Because, I mean, talk about unprecedented and just seeing, you have talked a lot on your podcast and when you were on here before about WWE's production crew and the way they do television. And I've talked about that a lot too, especially after, you know, working with those guys and, you know, having that kind of realization and seeing what's actually going on behind everything. And it really is, it's really remarkable. Actually, on the Patreon, with our Patreon group, the Not Sam Shills, I do Zoom meetings, before the pay-per-view. So we all got together for like an hour before WrestleMania and we were talking. And one of the guys in the Zoom room was in the stadium. He was at the show, and he was marveling at the crew. 10 minutes before the pay-per-view went live, the cage went down so they could wipe it down. And it's like, bro, WrestleMania starts in 10 minutes. And we have to get this cage dry before it starts. Like little things like that are just so wild to think about. But I mean, I think even more wild than all that is the fact that in all the time, not just in WrestleMania history, but in general, it's not just WrestleMania that is run in open air venues. And in every time, I remember people, when you go to New York, people are worried about it. WrestleMania 29, I remember, reading about the heated rings and how, there were space heaters in the posts so that in case it snowed, it's New York, the weather's not reliable, we can still have the matches, we'll have the covering over the ring and everything. I mean, Wembley State. I was in Wembley Stadium in 1992 for SummerSlam, open air. And it's like, it's England. It rains all the time. And you're going like, okay, we got to be ready for this. And everybody's always prepared, and it always ends up fine. And then, as Michael Cole so eloquently pointed out, we go 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day without a performance in front of fans, get into an open air venue, and for the first time, you have to delay the start of a show, and it's WrestleMania. What did you think? So the show starts, which I thought was a great start to it, because there was a huge debate. Who's going to get the first pop? Is it going to be Drew? Are they going to bring out Hogan and Titus? What are they going to do? The fact that Vince came out first and all the talent was on stage, I thought that was the move. Basically, the first pop was for the fans, ultimately, right? Like, that was who got the first pop. I thought that was a great move. BB Rex's singing America the Beautiful. Way to go, BB. The montage starts, the pirate guy's talking, whatever. All good. And then the consummate professional, except when he very seldom screws up the call on a classic WrestleMania match, the consummate professional, Michael Cole, sits there. And I swear, I thought he was going to say we got some bad news because he was with the Raw crew. I thought he was going to say we've got some bad news. Tom Phillips won't be here. And I thought to myself, they usually wouldn't do that. They would just go about their business. It's not that big of it's, when somebody on the broadcast team isn't there, somebody fills in and we keep it moving. But I was like, they're doing an on camera for this. I was like, good for Tom. And no, it's you might have noticed that Tom Phillips is not here, but regardless of that, we ain't starting the show. Like, it ain't time for WrestleMania yet. I know you thought it was. And I'm like, what are they going to vamp for 5 minutes? And when I realized, like, what I saw when I was watching the first 40 minutes of the show, which is crazy, is literally, I think, and you watching it probably knew exactly what was happening, but I think everybody just making it up as they went.
Yeah. I mean, so it's funny, right? Like, to go back to Cole real quick, man. So earlier tonight, you saw it. I put a tweet out just praising Michael Cole.
Because he's the greatest, dude. He
really is.
Yeah.
And of all nights for him to fucking shit in the bed, he doesn't on the finish call for WrestleMania, but I still stand by my words, man. Like, look, I love Jim Ross. I love Mauro Ranallo. Mm-hmm. I produced them both extensively. I was JR's PA when I first started in the WWE. Bell to bell, JR is phenomenal. He has very few peers. There is a lot more to that position than just calling a wrestling match. And that's what people don't understand. Me claiming that Michael Cole is the best in the game is not a detriment or being disrespectful to Jim Ross, to Mauro, to Gordon Soley, to Lance Russell,
Sean Mooney,
the legendary Sean Mooney, Lord Alfred Hayes, Gorilla Monsoon, Bobby the Brain Heenan,
Vince McMahon himself,
the boss himself. It's in no way me disrespecting those men, their body of work, and their legacies. but there is far more to that job. And trust me, I know from experience, than calling a match bell to bell. No one can handle that pressure, can navigate the show, can transition from element to element, from mood to mood, the same way that Michael Cole can. And I will gladly debate anybody and take this as far as it needs to go. And it's something that needs to be heard and appreciated and understood. It doesn't just mean what happens between the bell. That's not your only job. There is a far greater purpose to that position, and nobody feels it quite like Cole can. Quite like Cole can. Look at me. See, I can barely talk. See, imagine doing that for 5 hours straight.
Right. It's tough. It's tough.
But to the beginning, though, to the whole point of the beginning of the show. So when I hear Cole's making the announcement that there's, the weather delay is happening, I started seeing questions on my Twitter about, what was going on. And if they had a plan. A lot of folks were very critical about what they saw on the first 45 minutes of WrestleMania. I refuse to believe that they went into the biggest show of the year under these circumstances, knowing that weather was looming, because it's not like, look, there's a weather forecast and people check the fucking weather.
They got the app.
Yeah, there's an app.
Yep.
They even have meteorologists down in Tampa. My sources tell me. But there's no way that they didn't know that this weather was going to be an issue. There's no way that there wasn't any sort of contingency plan. Maybe not fully in place, but there's no way that there wasn't something. And maybe it was a situation where they did have a plan and they just weren't expecting to use it. Mm-hmm. Who knows? I wasn't there. But in terms of how it went off, number one, hats off to the talent.
Yes. Yeah.
My God. I guarantee you there were no scripts. Maybe a bullet point at the most. Hats off to the men and women of the locker room that just went out there and leaned into their characters and just cut some fucking awesome promos. And shout out to everyone involved, the production crew, set carp, stage managers, everybody on that crew, to really understand and appreciate it. The only correlation that I could make in terms of what people see on a normalized basis, I guess, that don't have that behind the curtain peek at what the men and women do that work for WWE behind camera. Think of a NASCAR pit crew. Think of how coordinated and unbelievably fast and well-moving a NASCAR pit crew is, and the pressure of what they have to do and how quickly they have to do it. That is what I imagine went into effect once they realized that the rain was going to affect that show. You've done a red carpet Hall of Fame show with me in the past, right?
Sure.
So those shows were pretty much people are walking in, and you had known positions. I had known positions of where the interviewers were going to be. And it was just a matter of communication between the stage managers and the production truck where Kevin Dunn was, and Gorilla where Vince was. All right, I've got Sarah Schreiber and she's got the New Day. Great. I've got Caleb Braxton and here's, Kevin Owens, or I've got Kevin Patrick and he's got, somebody. That's what it was. And it was pretty much a ping pong match back and forth because in essence, you're just filling time.
Yeah, but you know what? You know what was so impressive to me? And it was really funny because I tweeted out this thing that was like, I hope everybody that's been complaining about overly scripted promos is enjoying, the beginning of WrestleMania with an exclamation point. And I think I just come off as a real jerk because people thought I was like, people were like, we are. And I'm like, oh, good. Like, I wasn't being sarcastic. Like, I don't know why people, like, they were really good promos and, like, the talent was really getting stuff across. And I think the idea that I believe any other sports, live entertainment organization, when something that unexpected is unfolding that quickly, because I think something that's key here is it's not like they didn't know it was going to rain and then it started raining and they had a weather delay. It was, no, we're going to do the show in the rain. We didn't realize there would be lightning directly over the ring. Like, I mean, I don't know if I'm sure you noticed, Mike, because you would notice this thing, but I was amazed that the first match, the commentators were standing at ringside. And I was like, I wonder why. And then I realized that's because they're wired in. Yeah, and they had to push everything under the cover because the commentary table is all the way back at the guardrail. So the cover that's over the ring doesn't go back that far. So they had to be under that cover. But all these little things. But every other organization would have put the camera. It's not even like a TV thing. They don't have to worry about people changing the channel. They would put the camera on Cole, Byron, and Joe. And maybe they'd send somebody out to ringside. Maybe they wouldn't. They'd spend 40 minutes on that table. That's what they would do. And it's the WWE. They had Cole, they had Kayla, they had Kevin. They had 4 different set locations. Person to person. Let's send it to this. Let's send it to this. Let's send it to this. Let's throw this video package. And it's like the fact that they were doing that much on the fly. That's what the WWE does.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, look, it's very easy to say that you're great and you're good at something when everything goes well all the time. It's a true testament to how great you are as an entity and as a team when you do well when things are at their worst. And this was probably the worst case scenario to kick off the show. Look, were there some shortcomings? Absolutely. I thought some of the backstage talent didn't have a fair showing, and hopefully they look at their performances and kind of, realize their shortcomings and they address them and they fix them. And I think you use something like that to your advantage.
Yeah,
right?
that can trust me. When announced talent screws up, it can be a really good learning experience.
Shane, what was it you called Braun dumb? No, I think the word you're looking for is stupid.
Yeah, okay. I'll remember that next time.
Yeah, I'll remember that next time. Yeah. But, it's a true testament to how good you really are when you can rebound and when you can move forward and when you can do something like that when things are bad. And I was, my family for almost 12 years. So for me, I was just proud to see that everyone really scrambled and banded together and made it happen. Was it the cleanest and the prettiest TV? No, but did it serve its purpose? And did you actually manage to highlight some things that may have been shortcomings prior, especially with, how vocal the wrestling community is on the internet? Absolutely. So I loved the beginning of the show. To me, I was getting all kind of fired up watching it. And just really kind of just man, if I was there, I'd be doing it was just a really cool feeling.
Yeah, I was thinking about you because this is your first WrestleMania at home. Literally, even last year at WrestleMania, you were still there. And I'm like, after everything we've been through, how did me and Mike Mansury just become a couple of marks watching WrestleMania on Peacock? What the hell happened?
Right? It was surreal. I was getting texts from buddies outside of the business that are, also fans. And they, I got that question a lot, hey dude, how does it feel, to not be there? I wasn't present at the taping of last year's WrestleMania. I had a little bit of a health thing going on that prevented me from traveling down, but I wound up producing the kickoff shows with Rosenberg and Graves live from the TV studio in Stamford. So I still got the feel of WrestleMania, but that was the first time that I wasn't really truly there. But again, it was so early and fresh into the pandemic that you didn't really know which way was up. And it was just a matter of, all right, what do we need to do to get this done? And what part can I play to help make this happen? To truly be removed from it this year, it felt weird. You know what I mean? Because there really is a lot of pride for everyone involved that goes into making WrestleMania happen, because, it really does have that feeling and carry that weight of the Super Bowl for people in WWE, both on camera and behind the camera, because there's a lot of sacrifice, Sam. And I don't know if people really realize or appreciate that and what it takes to just be part of it, especially to be part of the TV and the touring side of things. You're not home as much. You're not around your family. The hours are long. The travel sucks. You've got office hours. You've got other obligations that are related to work. So to see all that culminate every year into what turns into WrestleMania week was always a sense of accomplishment. I mean, you got your ass kicked, because it's a very labor intensive week, but the sense of accomplishment and the pride that everyone would feel, and that I know that they're feeling right now, and this is just night one, is indescribable because, you know, it's the culmination, right? So I may not be a wrestler, but you know, I cut my teeth as a producer. If you're a graphic artist, wherever the case may be, you work to get to this point, and it is your Super Bowl. It's this is my championship moment. Hooray for me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think somebody that had that moment, how good was Titus? I love Titus in that role. I mean, he was just energy. He was just pure energy. I thought Titus O'Neil was fantastic. I mean, Hogan was Hogan, of course, but Titus O'Neil, I thought he was awesome.
Titus was great. I was actually a little bit disappointed that we didn't get more of Titus throughout the show.
Yeah.
And to me, that was kind of it's such a tricky thing with the hosting gig that they throw on people. I mean, I feel like since Rock did it, you know, it's always kind of under-delivered since then. I think like Alexa Bliss hosted a couple of years ago. One year they had the New Day host, I think, when we were in Orlando.
Yes.
But, you know, I would have liked to have seen Titus featured more. I think if you're going to put somebody in that position, you need to do more with it. Otherwise, it just seems like a publicity stunt.
Yeah, dude, I would make Titus O'Neil the GM of Raw. Like, I think he's awesome. I think
Titus had one of the greatest moments at last year's WrestleMania. What was it? Was it after it was after the Firefly Funhouse match? They went to him for an on camera, and he was just his expression looking into the camera was phenomenal.
So great. So great. So let's talk about that opener. Drew versus Bobby. I think that's the beauty of doing this match in the opening match. You can do whatever you want with it. It doesn't have to have that sort of end of WrestleMania feel to it unless you want. It could. You're allowed to, you know, Rollins got that moment when he opened 35 with Lesnar. So it can have that moment, but it doesn't have to. I was surprised. I was shocked. I thought, and I think this is one of those things that when you think that WWE has this sort of overarching plan and isn't moving on the fly, like I don't think 6 months ago the plan was to have Bobby Lashley leave WrestleMania as the defending champion. You know, I wouldn't think so. I think that was more, this is where we want to go, and then we'll read the room when he becomes champion and go, oh wait, we like this. This is what we want, because you know, I think people walked into WrestleMania thinking this is where Drew gets his flowers. Like he missed last year in the victory over Brock, and you know, in being in front of a crowd. And this is where, you know, he's going to get to hold up the title after winning it. He's going to conquer the unbeatable, and he's going to beat Bob Lashley, and he's going to be the WWE champion. And to watch Drew go down, and not only go down, but go down to the Hurt Lock, like. Bobby Lashley beat Drew McIntyre with a full Nelson tonight to retain the WWE Championship. I was like, wow. On one end, you could take it as that's a bummer for Drew, who did a lot of hard work over the last year to, you know, hold the company up on his shoulders when it was a tough time to do it. At the same time, I felt happy for Bobby Lashley, who it's like, look at WWE, not kind of going halfway, like, oh, kind of win. Let's make both guys look strong. It was, nope. Leaving WrestleMania, there is no mistake. When you turn on Raw on Monday night, Bobby Lashley's the man.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You know, it's funny, right? Like I get accused a lot of being a WWE homer with a lot of my sort of takes, right? But that's because I spent a third of my life actually working there. I think if I spent a third of my life working at another wrestling company, I'd have more insight in terms of how they operate and what they do and how they do their business.
I would hope so.
Right. So for me, you know, you mentioned like, right, 6 months ago, you would never have imagined that Lashley was going to be walking out of WrestleMania your champion, let alone walking in as your WWE champion.
Right.
I think what was interesting about the pandemic and the effect that it played on WWE specifically, and I would imagine this is probably the case with every other active wrestling promotion currently, I can't imagine that it's very easy to plan out things long-term with COVID, because you never know who may wind up testing positive, who may kind of just get pulled out for showing symptoms but not having it. There's just so many variables and so many unknowns that, you know, when you're trying to plot out, right? Because like we're always so used to WrestleMania stories, at least having, a 3-month build, if that, maybe longer, if it's a story that you're pretty invested in. It was hard to get that this year, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And even on the other side of this, I mean, right? Like, look, Charlotte Flair's not on the WrestleMania card.
Wild.
Right. And I guess it was, broke a couple weeks ago that, initially she was pulled because there was a potential that she may have been pregnant. And then eventually, she winds up testing positive for COVID. So it's very hard to factor somebody into these plans when you don't know what can happen. And you're living kind of show to show in terms of what you can advertise and what you can promote to get to your big show. I think what helps WrestleMania is that the WrestleMania brand is over. And that it's this monster that WWE has spent 37 years building.
Yeah.
And very much like the Super Bowl, you can sell out the Super Bowl without knowing who's going to play in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a destination event. WrestleMania is now a destination event and has been for a very long time. But to be able to pivot with the peaks and valleys of what COVID has done, in the wrestling game, right? Like I think Drew McIntyre had gotten COVID at one point. So
yeah,
you find yourself in a position where you have to establish stars, but across all parts of your card. And going back to what we talked about earlier, the conversation about even looking at SmackDown with the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal and the cast of characters that were there that weren't featured in WrestleMania, but they're such heavy hitters. I think WWE actually did a really great job of building up the roster to the point where it had to become a plug and play situation based on, who could go for WrestleMania and who couldn't.
Do you leave that match feeling like, oh, that's a bummer, that's unfair to Drew, he kind of deserved to have his moment? Or, yeah, I mean, this isn't about giving people moments. This is the move that made sense for the story that we're telling right now.
It's the move that made sense for the story. I think it would have come across very phony, Sam, if you just had Drew go over for the sake of giving Drew his WrestleMania moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's unfortunate that his WrestleMania moment had to come at the beginning of the pandemic, where the culmination of the 16-year journey, 17-year journey had to take place in front of nobody at the Performance Center, as opposed to Raymond James Stadium, like it was initially supposed to culminate for him. But I think if you put it on him, what's the story going forward?
Right. How does this not feel like we're just starting this year the same way that we started last year? Like we're running in a circle. Yeah, I would agree. I was happy that it felt like a little bit more of a gutsy move and a little bit more of a forward thinking move to do it this way. As much as I love Drew, then to just do that because let's give him a pat on the head. And I don't think Drew wants to win the championship because people like him. I think if he's going to be the guy, he wants to be the guy because he's the guy. And so, yeah, I was very interested in it. I thought it was a real strong way to start the show. The women's tag team turmoil match. So a couple things stood out to me. I love a botch. And I don't care. I will point out every botch because my botches are pointed out to me. I don't complain about it. I embrace it. I make a t-shirt out of it. It is what it is. So
I'm still waiting on mine, by the way.
You deserve one. You absolutely. Mandy falling down on the way to the ring was just about the funniest thing you could ever see at a WrestleMania. It was awesome. Awesome. Man. Poor Mandy, but it was awesome. And then I think it was Greg Hamilton. I don't think it was Mike Rome doing the announcing for that match.
It was Greg. It was Greg for the tag team Turmoil match.
Hamilton. By the way, Mike Rome and Greg Hamilton are great ring announcers. So this isn't an attack on their profession. It's just pointing out a funny moment where the thing that you don't want to happen happens, and you announce, unfortunately, that the person that just scored the pinfall got eliminated. And then Cole is sitting there going like, no, that's not what happened. And, like, you never want the ring announcer, and somebody, I'm assuming, right? Somebody was in his ear going, correct it. Because as the ring announcer, you never want to be like, I'd like to make a correction. Like, it's not, you don't want to do that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was wrong.
But on the positive side of things for that match, I thought Billy Kay is a treasure. Billy, I mean, from the moment I thought she commanded attention. Like I am actually looking forward to, I like that Natalya and Tamina won because I love the idea that I think it's just going to be an ass-kicking women's tag team match. It's going to be cool. But I thought Billie Kay left by far the biggest impression in that match. I thought from the moment that they came out and Billie put that curtain over Carmella and Carmella's like, what are you doing? And then like the entire walk to the ring, Billie is looking at Carmella and trying to copy what she's doing. And it's just so awkward. And then I feel like Billie Kay has just become an expert at using every second of airtime that she gets as the best possible. She doesn't overdo it. She doesn't, try to make it so that like, okay, I got it. It's just right. And it's every opportunity. And I just thought she was so good.
It's funny, right? You would say, looking at the Iconics before the split, that you would have thought that Peyton would have been the Shawn and Billie would have been the Jannetty.
Yep.
And you've gotten the exact opposite.
Yes.
Peyton cut that impassioned promo a couple months back on Raw Talk, and she laid an egg against Asuka. Mm-hmm. Billie really has leaned into the entertainment side of things and has really capitalized and given herself a strong presence on SmackDown. Even if she's not working in the ring, she's made herself into a character that will occasionally find herself in the throes of a wrestling match. In terms of the gauntlet match, it wasn't good.
Which, by the way, I thought it was supposed to be tag team Turmoil. When they originally said it, didn't they say it was going to be all the teams and the first team that gets a pinfall wins?
But card subject to change.
Yeah, but how could the rules of the match change? But they didn't change the name of it.
I know. It was it was a bit wonky, but I feel like the whole thing obviously was just thrown together so haphazardly. It very much seemed like WWE was heading to WrestleMania with just 2 women's matches across 2 nights of WrestleMania, which they probably would have been crucified for. Hats off to Natty and Tamina, obviously, for getting the win and for getting that WrestleMania moment, and to everyone involved. Unfortunately, the match just was not very good, and it was sloppy. It just it was rushed. Like I almost was getting the impression while watching it, that I was like, did they lose time? And is that why they're kind of rushing through things? And is that why things are kind of sloppy? Because, those are all established performers that, that they all have their strengths and they can go. But I think it fell short, and that was the weak point on the card to me.
Yeah, I felt that vibe too, actually, that there was something lost in like the direction, where like people were just on different pages and maybe didn't exactly know what the goal of what they were doing was. Like when I watch even the botched announcement, when Cole was correcting him, he was saying, no, Liv won the match. And then I was like, no, actually she just eliminated. There's still another team. It was like, there was no, I don't think anybody involved really knew what was going on. I feel like that's a match that was probably changed maybe during the rain delay. Like they were like,
yeah, you know what? But you may be right, Sam. They may have been done in an effort to save time, right?
Right.
They may have just switched things up because,
they lost 45 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would imagine, right, you're delayed 45 minutes. Raymond James Stadium is a stadium that's run by the local Tampa government. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times venues have a curfew. And obviously in the throes of a pandemic, and you've got lightning kind of threatening the area, because if you're in an outdoor setting, like an outdoor gathering, I forget what the mileage radius is, but if there's a lightning strike within wherever that radius is, you have to seek shelter. You can't be in your seats. Like even if you're working the event, you got to kind of duck away.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, I think something went on there. I thought Seth versus Cesaro was exactly what I thought it was going to be. It was just great. I mean, it's just 2 pros that know what they're doing. Both entrances were great. I felt like the Cesaro got the moment, and you felt it. You could feel that Graves was feeling it emotionally. Like he's like, that's my dude. Like you felt what you were supposed to feel for Cesaro. I thought they did a great job of building up the swing, even though, that I like that the swing is something that we've seen for years, but the fact that Seth thought that it was damaging to his pride.
Put it over that much more.
Yes. Now it becomes this thing that when Cesaro hits Seth, not only is it a move, he just beat Seth on that level. So I thought that was great, and it was exactly what it should have been, and it was awesome and so cool to see Cesaro get a singles victory on his own at WrestleMania, and it's a great match. I thought they also, speaking of good builds, even within the match, the build to Almost getting in the ring, like when that match was first announced, I think people were like, what? Because there were rumors that AJ wanted to face Triple H at WrestleMania. And so when you go, not only is AJ not wrestling Triple H at WrestleMania, it's AJ and Omos versus the New Day. You were like, what? Like, huh? I thought it was going to be. But then something happened. And over the course of the last few weeks on Raw, I started feeling like people started to get excited about the prospect of seeing Omos in a ring. And it's like, you only had 2 matches announced for WrestleMania when that tag match was announced. That was one of the first matches announced for WrestleMania. So you started feeling like, oh, maybe there is something with this Omos thing. Maybe it's not just like we're going to have the tall guy wrestle. Having AJ be in that match as long as he was, I thought was really good because you build to it. And this story they were telling where the New Day, their strategy was to just not let AJ ever tag his partner ever. Xavier Woods yelling.
Yes, how great is that? He's yelling tag team psychology commentary to Cole and Graves. Or to the Raw announce team. Yeah. It was so awesome. I mean, and to see the New Day as a whole at the top with Biggie doing the intro was absolutely great. Biggie, there's a spy camera in the production truck that, can see Gorilla. And if I were ever producing a show that New Day was on, it was always great to watch Big E, the way he does his insert city name here announcement, because the way he would just get into it and he's moving and he's feeling it was great. And I'm glad people got to see that tonight at WrestleMania. But what a story. And the best part about wrestling that people tend to overlook goes beyond wins and losses. It's when you can help to make someone and to help establish a new character, because that character is going to become a player that down the road and in the immediate future even can be somebody that you can do good business with. And the New Day and AJ Styles worked their asses off to make Omos. Yeah. A guy that's I don't think he's ever wrestled a match, Sam, outside of his training at the Performance Center. And you got a guy that's 7'3", that's athletic.
Legit 7'3", by the way. Not wrestling 7'3".
No, Sam, he's 7'3". Like I'm not tall. I'm 5'8" because of my head, my hair, and if I stand up straight. Standing next to Almost, like I felt like his kneecap and I were like eye to eye. But he's a big athletic dude, and he looks the part, right? He looks the part of a big scary giant. And to be put in that situation has got to be nerve-wracking, right? Like you go back to Big Show talking. Well, Big Show's first match was Hogan, right? At Halloween Havoc. Yeah. Yeah. So, there's another guy that's put in this situation because of his physical stature alone. Almost is in that same situation, but he's unbelievably fortunate enough to have the best components to help him with that match and to help him be featured and to help him look strong. And that match was put together well and Almost did the best with the little that he had to do and that he needed to do. Yep. You didn't need any more out of him than what he did.
And that's one of those things too, that when the Hurt Business lost the tag championship, it was like, why would you take the title off the Hurt Business? And you don't understand that even though that was 6 weeks ago, it's because of this. Like you took the titles off the Hurt Business to get Omos over. And it's like, wait, what do you mean? Well, because you can't have the Hurt Business be the ones they're heels. So you have to get the New Day in here, and the New Day are this they're the greatest, they're on the list of the greatest tag teams of all time at this point. So the idea that that's who Almost takes out, and the idea that they're, is the biggest baby faces in the world, that's the story that needs to be told. I mean, I sent a tweet about it. I was like joking, but it really wasn't joking. If this were 95, 96, Almost would absolutely break the Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, because it wasn't like he would definitely beat the Undertaker at WrestleMania. The streak never would have existed
Yeah, but in fairness, though, he probably would be in a nude-colored bodysuit with awkward chest hair sewn into it.
And they wouldn't have bothered to put him through the PC. He would have just come doing like big, bonk head slams and stuff like that.
He could have been like the Yeti. He just all right. What sort of mythical creature can we make this massive human being into? He did what he needed to do. And again, hats off to everybody involved. When they replayed that, just massive bomb slam that he laid Kofi out with, that tight shot of Kofi's face while he's down and just selling. The finish is so good.
That's the other thing that, by the way, AJ and AJ getting up on his shoulders. Like, AJ is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. AJ is an established guy. Like, there are guys that won't do that because they don't want to, seem like a goof or seem like second banana. Like, that puts him over everything Xavier Woods and Kofi did for him. You can't say enough about it. But the camera shots, like, there was one moment when Xavier Woods did this little thing. He was like doing like those shin kicks on him when he first got in the ring. Yeah. These kicks that almost wasn't selling at all. And then Xavier Woods did he did the slightest sell where he just kind of tapped his shin as if like, oh, that hurt, but I don't want to act like it's hurting, but it did hurt. And I'm like, that little thing that adds to you're like, oh, okay. Those little details are so great. And at one point, Kofi gets slammed down and Kofi and Xavier are down on the ground and the camera is from the perspective of their head. And it looks up at Almost. And it was so cool.
Yeah, really well done. Great job in terms of presentation to really put over how massive of a human being Almost actually is.
All right, let's wrap up our conversation of night one and I hope that the man that you work with now doesn't get jealous of a new celebrity debut coming in and taking a lot of attention. I think going way over expectations. I told somebody online, they were like, were you surprised or did you expect it to be good? And I said, I expected to go in surprised at how good it was. So yes, that's like my expectations were met in the sense that I was like, wow, like Miz deserves so many accolades for the stuff that he did for Bad Bunny. And Morrison too, by the way. Morrison taking that Canadian Destroyer was just the damnedest thing I've ever seen in my life. But I mean, Miz helping him tell the story. Miz and Morrison just did so great by Bad Bunny tonight. But it's not like he was a ragdoll either. Like, it's very clear that Bad Bunny spent a lot of time working really hard on putting together a really good performance tonight.
Understatement.
Yeah.
So here you have a guy, Sam, that is a multi-platinum Grammy Award winner that grew up a massive fan of the business, respects and loves the business, which goes a long way with the talent in the locker room. He loved it so much and was dedicated to making this so good that he actually moved to Orlando so that he could train out of the Performance Center.
And anybody that thinks that that's not true, like when I heard that, I was like, well, that would explain why he's on Raw every week because he lives there now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has a house in Miami. I'm sure he's got houses everywhere, but sure. I think Miami's kind of home base for him. But yeah, put himself up in Orlando. Was training pretty diligently at the Performance Center. And you said it best, man. Hats off to Miz and Morrison because, the match doesn't happen that way without phenomenal foils to work with. And obviously to be so generous and so giving to make Bad Bunny look great. Bad Bunny, for his part, his stuff looked good. He sold like $1 million. Yeah. I would even argue that some of the selling was probably legitimate.
It was really funny. It's really funny watching the referee and how he would check on Bad Bunny because it wasn't the same way that you would check on somebody that's been there before. Like I feel like after pretty much every sort of even slightly major move that Bad Bunny took, the referee was there just to make sure. Yeah. Because he hasn't done anything like that before.
No, I got to give him the office, brother. You're okay. But yeah, it's pretty wild, right? And I think what always I think what made Pat's debut and just his involvement overall with NXT and WWE in general is the same thing that made Bad Bunny's experience what it wound up being. And I think it's that love and that respect. That's the base that everything is built off of. And it's so genuine that it resonates well with the fans. It resonates well with the talent. And, it leads obviously to great things. Completely different performances and, stories than what Pat was doing. But wow, I mean, to be thrust into that situation, because he's not an athlete.
Right. That's the big difference. Like,
and,
people
and
were like,
not saying that he's not athletic, but someone's child, I guess, was the determining factor in his take. Meltzer's kid, I guess, said that he's not athletic or whatever from a basketball game, but fucking bozos. But, the guy went into something completely foreign to him and was able to put that out. That doesn't happen without that dedication, without that passion, without that drive. And it was awesome. It was from people that I know that were there live, that were in the crowd in attendance watching. They were asking me, they were like, "Hey, how is this sounding on TV?" Because the fucking reactions that this guy's getting during the match are unbelievable. And it did. I thought it resonated really well through the TV audience. Hats off to Bad Bunny, man. Brother put in the work and it showed. And a great night for Damian Priest as well. He wasn't overly involved in the match like I thought he would be, but I think he had enough of a presence to where he's going to come out. And I think he's going to be a player for Raw on the other side of this, man. I like the Damian Priest that we're seeing on Raw more than I like the presentation of Damian Priest down at NXT.
Yeah, I think that Damian Priest not getting as involved as some would expect is just, it's more hats off to Bad Bunny and the fact that Damian Priest is only getting as involved in that match as he needed to be. Ultimately, people want to see Bad Bunny wrestle, right? That's why you're watching that match to begin with. But I'm so happy because I'm a big Damian Priest fan. So I'm so happy that that's the spot for him. I do think that it feels a little bit more multifaceted, a little bit more real life, a little bit more human on the main roster than it did in NXT. And I also think that he's going to be a player. And while, yeah, I mean, I guess he didn't have as much time in the ring to do moves and stuff like that. He had a kick-ass entrance at WrestleMania, and it was a solo, like he got his own solo kick-ass entrance with the big 3D graphic and everything. So I think it's a pretty great way to introduce somebody because it doesn't always happen so easily. It's one of the better ways that a character has been introduced coming up from NXT, I think.
I think so too. I mean, look, Sam, in terms of WrestleMania moment, this match was almost not a tag match.
Yeah, true. True.
I think there were some injuries behind the scenes that both Priest and Morrison were going through that, kind of put the tag component into jeopardy, which was how the match was being built leading into WrestleMania. Then you kind of get into Bad Bunny Miz being made a singles and then eventually becoming a tag. But that almost didn't happen. So if I'm Damian Priest, that's a win.
Well, Mike Mansury, I always appreciate your wisdom and your insight.
I have to cut you off because I want to save you from getting heat.
Why is that?
And maybe my amnesia is kicking in, but I feel like, did we not talk about Shane and Braun Strowman?
We didn't talk about Shane and Braun Strowman. Now, and you're right. Thank you. My vision.
You still have to go there. I don't want you to wind up with that.
My vision, right? There was something about it where like I walked in and like, I feel like that story has been it's such a weird, disjointed kind of story where I'm like, so it really is just that Shane decided one day to start calling this guy stupid. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. Screw the whole thing. Let's take this all the way. And I'm going, what I want I want this to keep going. I don't want this to end. I want Braun Strowman and Shane. I want Braun to be bullied by Shane for another month. And I'm like, what if we have Shane either get thrown, like the big Shane spot, because that's what we're all waiting for, right? Is either to get thrown over the cage or through the cage, a la St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Yes. So that, Braun is still this powerhouse. Shane leaves in a heap, but on his way out on a stretcher, he can get the microphone and go, I want Braun. because you're so stupid. And just Braun, like that would have, I thought that would have been like, when I started thinking about it, I'm like, I'm sure pitching that to Braun wouldn't have been the most pleasant thing in the world, because he's like, what are we doing? But I don't know. There's something about that story where it's like, if we're doing it, let's do it. And I would have laughed hilariously, and I think really respected it if they had just gone all the way and had Shane get one over on him, because Braun is so stupid.
Do you remember that scene when we were kids of Vince getting wheeled out in the gurney and then just weakly putting his hand up and like giving like this middle finger on the way out? Yeah. That would have been awesome if Shane did exactly what you laid out there. I was really skeptical of this match in terms of the build. Obviously, you knew you were going to see something, especially if you put Shane in a steel cage with anybody. Mm-hmm. But I was skeptical because I thought it was a little too just, I think I said on the Best Wrestling Show period with Madden that I felt like this match and the Riddle Sheamus US title match were booked by a 5-year-old. In one match, you have the rich kid called the big guy stupid. And the other match, you have a match being made because the big guy pushed the little guy off his scooter.
I mean, that is the story. Yeah. It
resonated with the audience. And I'm surprised by that. The whole, the big guy being bullied, and, both guys played their parts well. I thought the slime and everything was a little bit childish, but I think they not overcame, because maybe that's exactly what they were tending to do. Their story built itself into a situation where they delivered a match that needed to be exactly what it was. God bless Shane for taking that bump off the top of the cage. I felt my spine go out of alignment when he hit. And hats off to Braun. I feel like Braun, to me, I thought this was a bigger moment for Braun, Sam, than when he beat Goldberg last year.
I think so too, because it felt like when he beat Goldberg last year, I think to fans,
it was a scab.
It felt like it was done out of necessity.
Yeah.
It felt like, like smart fans, quote unquote, right? It felt like, we know Braun's not the guy. We know that you just did this at the last minute, right? There was something about it where it didn't feel legitimate. This one, it almost feels like this story was built so that Braun could throw Shane McMahon off the top of a cage. And I really enjoyed, I liked Braun grabbing his hand. And I was like, well, where is he going to like flip him over the top? I liked Braun tearing the cage. And they did it in a way, cool. Where it was just the corner of it. So it wasn't like it was a punch away wall, and it wasn't like, okay, well, this is going to come into effect later. It was just, this is a big, strong guy that just ripped a hole in this cage. I thought that didn't disappoint. It was funny, the toolbox up there. You know what made the toolbox okay for me being up there?
It was Adam Cole's toolbox.
It was Adam Cole's toolbox. I had seen it on Thursday. They brought it from Orlando to Tampa. They just Triple H actually brought it with him.
Here, put this here.
But they had another, like one of those sacks on the other side of the cage that they didn't use. So I was like, okay, so it wasn't just this weird thing that we've never seen before. At least they had one on the other side of the cage. So it's like,
so those sacks do serve purpose,
right?
They're real, because those. So the cages, obviously, because they're lowered down, motors and chains and everything. So those chains typically are what house the sacks are what houses those chains when the cage is down and when it goes up.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. And so, so I like that they didn't do that. They didn't make it, some weird thing where it's like, why would this be there? But I thought Shane's bump was good. We were waiting for it. It paid off. And, as much as I would have loved to have seen Shane carried out on a stretcher calling Braun stupid, because there's just something about,
so good.
And maybe it's just because I'm just a snarky little guy, but there's just something about picking on a big guy and then he beats you up and then you're just still talking shit. It's like, what are you going to do? You already beat me up and I'm still calling you stupid. What are you going to do? Like, there's just something so like infuriating about that I feel like, it could have kept going. But I was glad that Braun did get that moment, because I think he did. I think ultimately he did come across as getting a victory all's well that ends well. He doesn't come across as stupid, and also it's interesting that I feel like an extremely clear-cut baby face now, which is like sometimes it's tough to tell with Braun. But
He'll be a heel in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know. You're right. yeah, he will be. Yeah, he will be. I mean, but today he's fighting all the bullies. So,
hey, you know what? This makes up for having to win the tag titles with a 10-year-old at a WrestleMania 34.
Yep. I'd rather throw Shane McMahon off the roof of a cage than grab Nicholas and win the titles. Yeah, that's probably right.
I tell you what, I thought he was going to wind up throwing Shane off the top and to the announce table. Braun did that to Kevin Owens, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he did do that to Kevin Owens at one point. I mean, he still could have done it again, but that I was wondering when they were up there if that's where they were going, if like Braun, like Shane was going to flip him off or something, and Braun was going to like clothesline him and knock Shane off the cage onto the floor. I mean, Shane McMahon.
He has no fear, Sam.
He not only
zero fear.
Not only does he have no fear, but it's not like he wants to do this. Like there's something like he's got that thing in him where he's like, "Yo, writers, do you think we can write a story that culminates with me getting thrown off the top of the cage?" And they're like, I mean, I guess, we can.
They work backwards though. He comes in, he's like, "Hey, I've got this great idea about a big bump off of a cage.
Yeah.
Right, how do we get there?
Yeah.
Let's go backwards."
Yeah, that's right. Like when he fell off the two, he was like, "I want to jump off 2 SummerSlam Titantrons." And they're like, Steve Blackman. You're like, all right, let's go. yeah. I thought that match delivered exactly what it should have delivered. Nothing more, nothing less. I thought it was successful.
I begrudgingly agree.
Yeah. Well, you can hear Mike begrudgingly agree and non-begrudgingly disagree with Mark Madden every single week on the Best Wrestling Podcast, period. You get
Best Wrestling Show, period.
You can get it. You can get it anywhere you get audio podcasts and on YouTube and Twitter and everything. So, Mike, I always like chatting you up. To use
I relish these moments.
Yeah,
they live right here.
Yeah, and I feel like the more we do this, the more it's going to be like we're just going to go longer and longer and longer every time.
We've been going for a while now, haven't we?
Yeah, we're starting to approach like I was thinking 45. We're about double. But hey, WrestleMania, there's a lot to unpack. I'm glad we unpacked.
Well, we had to catch up. This was our first WrestleMania not getting to work together in a very long time.
Since Orlando.
Yeah. We've had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows.
But you know what? I felt you know what made me feel okay about being at home for this year's WrestleMania? Had a pretty good night on Twitter. Had some action on there. So I was like, okay, good.
I did too. So I'm still relatively new to this Twitter game. I had myself a blast. I went at Tony Khan.
I saw you going. I mean, I think you probably saw my reply to your Tony Khan tweet. That was a good one.
Hey man, look, it's when you make your business an I business. That's typically the HOV lane to failure.
By the way, I did want to send a tweet out to Meltzer because like the rumor in the Wrestling Observer was that Becky Lynch was going to come back and she was going to drive a truck into WrestleMania. And the minute I saw Bad Bunny driving a truck into WrestleMania, I'm like, oh my God. So he found out there was a truck and he made the rest up. like it's what are they going to, so tomorrow is Becky Lynch going to also come out in a truck? I mean, maybe, I don't know, but probably not. They probably won't do 2 trucks.
We need to talk about that truck one day. That truck idea was supposed to be a lot cooler than what it wound up being. Obviously things had to change because of the pandemic, but we'll tell the story one day. Becky and I came up with that idea the night I gave my notice to WWE in Brooklyn.
Wow. Well, then we got something to talk about for next time, don't we?
Cliffhanger. We'll leave them in suspense, Sammy.
We'll do it. Thank you, Michael Mansury.
Hey, the pleasure was all yours, my friend.